Welcome to So You Want to Join the C-Suite, a monthly podcast based on our ILTACon 2025 panel. This series takes you inside the realities of law firm leadership. We share unfiltered stories about what it takes to lead at the top, the wins, the trade-offs, and the moments nobody else talks about. Each month, we dig into the messy, behind-the-scenes side of executive life, navigating chaos, avoiding burnout, earning trust, and learning how to lead when everyone wants a piece of your time or your budget. Today, we're discussing leading without losing your mind. We'll explore the shifting landscape of the C-suite and what it takes to stay ahead of the curve. But first, some introductions. Jim, will you kick us off?
Certainly. Thank you, Cecy. My name is James McKenna. I am the CIO of Fenwick & West. I've enjoyed this position for 9 years. I've been in legal since 1999. I've worked at 2 law firms, Morrison & Forster for the first part of my career, and Fenwick & West is where I currently am. I am an active ILTA participant. I've been a board member for 12 years, and I'm a former ILTA president. Thank you.
Welcome, Jim. Skip, your turn.
Thank you, Cecy. Skip Lohmeyer. I'm the CIO at Parker Poe, Adams & Bernstein. We're a Southeast law firm, about 300 attorneys. I'm stationed here in Charlotte, North Carolina. This is my 5th law firm over the last 29 years in legal firms, all of which but one, I was the lead or department head for the IT department. I've managed e-discovery groups, the library function, and a miscellaneous other hodgepodge, whatever is assigned to the CIO. But it's been a great ride. Glad to be a part of the team.
Thanks, Skip. Michael, how about you?
Sure. Thanks, Cecy. My name is Michael Bruckner. I have been in the C-suite for just 7 years now. First as CIO of a Washington, D.C. based AmLaw 200 firm with about 250 users. And then in my current role, which I've been in for coming up on 3 years, at Duane Morris, where we have roughly 1,950 or so users across our global enterprise. Prior to moving inside of law firms, I was a consultant to them for about 10 years before that. But my legal career actually started when I was in high school. One of my first jobs was working for a friend of our family, my hometown. He had a small real estate firm and real estate title company. So I was just like a jack of all trades for him. And then when I was in college, I spent summers working as a messenger, and I'm really dating myself here because messengers haven't existed inside law firms for a long time, at Sullivan and Cromwell here in DC. So I guess I'm what you'd call a lifer, but in many different forms. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Michael. And Adam, take it away.
Thanks, Cecy. So I'm probably the baby of the group, maybe not by age, but by legal experience. So I'm the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Operating Officer for Hooper Law, a small law firm in Wisconsin. And prior to this, I was in managed services, managing the MITS department of a fairly large international managed service provider. And then I was also a director of technology for a boutique law firm down in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But prior to that, and sort of at the same time as that, I was a chief officer of a fire department for many years. And so I have a pretty unique background in managing teams and situations, specifically stressful situations and sort of organizational excellence, if you will. And so my road here was a bit different, but I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to share my experience with everybody.
Thanks, Adam. And I'm Cecy Graf. I've been in law firms for 20 years. I've been in the C-suite for 10 of those. My first C-suite role was as CFO for a startup during a very brief excursion outside of the legal industry, but then I came back to law firms as CFO of Stoll Reeves. I was with Stoll for 5 years before I was lured away by a private equity company that had purchased the back office of Ramon Law. They recruited me to build out that back office into a shared services platform. And I fell in love with the concept, but we had some differences of opinion about the execution. So we parted ways, and I formed with my partner Federate Legal over a year ago and entered my entrepreneurial era as CEO. Federate's a managed services organization that supports small to mid-sized firms and brings that big law tools and techniques and expertise to firms that might not necessarily be able to access them on their own. So let's talk about leading without losing your mind. Everything is changing very rapidly in our world. We've got AI, which of course we all talk about all the time, and all of the things that it could do to change our world. KPMG has started a law firm in Arizona, so Big Four is moving into the space along with a number of other alternative service providers and non-traditional approaches to the practice of law. And then private equity, one of my favorite topics, is really, and other outside investment is really looking at how to maybe restructure law firms so that they can invest. So there's a lot of different factors and different forces at play in our space right now. As we look ahead into the future, Jim, when you have your crystal ball looking ahead 5 years, what's something that we need to shift as our mindset or a skill that we need to build as executives to stay relevant in the midst of all of this?
Thank you, Cecy. And I think that's a really great question. One of the things that I thought when I hit the C-suite is once I was there, I would practice being an executive. And what I have found, and this was what I would suggest over the next 5 years, is in addition to that perspective, there's another one that's even more relevant and more challenging. And that is you have to keep on learning. And if you aren't learning what you are responsible for in terms of what can be done, what other people are doing with it, what is looking like is going to be a possibility over the horizon, somebody else is going to come around with that information. So the way to stay relevant is that you're perpetually upping your game. And I'm going to draw an analogy. You don't necessarily know how to rebuild the car per se when it comes to AI or the systems that you have at your work. I happen to be a CIO and I look at things from an information technology perspective, but you have to understand why they work and why in combinations there's a multiplier effect and what you can do to help benefit other departments. So the short version of that answer is you have to keep on learning. It doesn't end when you get there. It's just the beginning. It's like you summited one mountain to see an even bigger mountain range in front of you.
So I totally embrace the fact that we all have to keep learning and that we're absolutely part of an ecosystem in all of our organizations. What do you need to unlearn to get there, to succeed?
The biggest thing I feel we need to unlearn is that the old ways will always work. And
Mm.
there's a couple of things on the horizon right now that are game changers, one of which is technology, another of which is how law firms are structured. So from a technology standpoint, AI is a game changer. I would say the single biggest change in the world of finance, and one could argue a variety of different disciplines from 1970 to 2000 was the advent of the spreadsheet. It had a material effect on how people did their work. From 2000 to 2030, one could have said it was the internet. Another could have said it was mobility. I actually think the one that's going to win that race is AI. And the notion that we can take things from decades past and just double down on that effort or the way of looking at the universe then and apply it to the future and be successful, I think is fundamentally flawed. And it's flawed from the perspective that we're not 100% certain yet what's going to be possible in the future. But it's really, really helpful to embrace the future from the perspective that there's a lot of possibilities, some of which are visible, some of which are invisible, and it's our job to figure that out.
We talked a little bit on a recent post about um, balancing innovation and the we've always done it that way mentality. And that I think that really comes into play here too, in that there's a reason it was done that way. So you have to address the underlying requirements, but just because it got you here doesn't mean it's going to get you there, right? So Skip, what's one decision you made recently that's about what's next, not just about what's now?
Well, I think I have to dovetail right off of what Jim was talking about, is that artificial intelligence is going to change a number of different areas. It's a disruptive technology to the way we've always done things. So what we've done recently is we've challenged ourselves to rethink how people learn and adopt technology. Is no longer we throw them into training classes or we give them quick reference guides or training videos. We've gone to where we want to do live coaching where they use their business analyst skills, where we have professionals that will go to the attorney or the legal team and say, what are you trying to do? How are you accomplishing your legal tasks, your workflow? Where are the challenges? And try to target what they need with the new technology tools we've already adopted, but also look at synthesizing new innovative technologies or solutions that might be out there that team or that individual attorney can benefit from. So it's worth rethinking the whole training structure, where we call it more digital productivity teams, where they're doing that business analyst work, they're doing targeted training and coaching, and then they're finding new services. All of those have started to reshape our adoption. So we're using the scalpel rather than a machete to do the operating on, helping people adjust their lives to the new norm of, adopting artificial intelligence as a disruptive technology.
That's super interesting. Are you pre-selecting the tools, or are you selecting the tools after you do the requirements gathering?
Some of the tools are selected by a focus group. For example, we have an AI committee. I imagine a lot of firms have AI committees or innovative technology committees. And they might run through a scenario of several different needs, and then look at tools, and then select a couple to pilot. That's the way we've approached it. And then through pilots, you end up adopting one or two and then pushing it out to the whole firm. If it's the type of technology that the whole firm would adopt, maybe it's targeted to one or two different practice groups. So we target just those practice groups. So we do pre-select some through that focus group function, but then through these coaching sessions that we have, where we're trying to enhance digital productivity, we might hear something that we say, there's a gap here. Let's go find a solution. Let's go build a solution. Let's modify what we have today to meet that group's need to raise their level of efficiency.
Wow. That's and are you fighting a lot of, but that's not how I work, as you're having these?
So over the last probably 18 months, most firms have delved into this artificial intelligence. And I talked to several of my colleagues about what is the adoption like. And it seems like, to me, this is my perspective, there are three buckets they kind of fit in. The first bucket, I always hope it's a whole 1/3 of the firm, it's not always, where they are ready to adopt. They're just hungry for these changes. They're the ones driving some of the changes and on these focus groups, for example. They're forward thinking. They're training other people on how to use the tools. That's that group. The second group are the people that are getting the feedback from those other forward thinking attorneys who are trying those things through trial and error and seeing what works and sharing what works with the others. So that next 1/3, I guess you could say, is listening to their colleagues. We're working with them with the digital productivity team, and then they're adopting the technology. Then you've got the last third. And for various reasons, and it's all over the gamut. Some might say, well, it's maybe the more seasoned professional. It isn't always. Some might say it's the tech savvy people. It isn't always. It's all over the spectrum. What we do know is they say they don't have the time. They don't have the time to have the disruption to their normal workflow because they're just so busy. So how do you infuse them with that scalpel approach so that they can stay up to speed, be aware of the tools, at least of what's out there for them to try out when they do have an opportunity to enhance their productivity?
I love that approaching it in thirds. I've seen the technology adoption curve, which is not quite as generous when it comes to
It's
the early
harder than it
adopters.
looks. And we've gone through several campaigns. So we went through the campaign of large group training. Then we went through the campaign of practice group level training. And each time you go through those, you garner more people that are trying things out and enhancing and using the tool and enhancing their productivity by using the tools. And then as of late, we're recording some of the wins in short mini-like vignette videos. So there might be 30 seconds to 3 minutes. No one has attention span anymore past 3 minutes, it seems like.
TikTok.
The attorney talking about, here's what I did of using co-counsel, Harvey, or whatever you're using to enhance their work. And then you share that with the productivity people that are related. So in the same practice group, in the same transactional functionality, whatever that may be. And then that has sparked some more people into using the tools, or at least being willing to try them. Now we're on to the next campaign of going and finding that group of people, that small nucleus of a legal team or an individual attorney that can affect others, and saying, how are you working? Where are your pain points? What are your opportunities? And then hitting them with custom training or coaching that affects them in their world.
So making it really targeted and specific, I think, makes it, obviously in my experience, the attorneys respond much better to things that they feel are tailored to them and to their practice. And so I can see how that is much more compelling in the environment. That hasn't always been how we've approached it, right? It's, we've rolled out technology to the whole firm, not really focusing on how individual practices are going to use it, which leads me to my next question for Michael. Which is, how do you think the definition of leadership is changing and how we're approaching leadership has to change?
Sure. I mean, that was a pretty good segue you teed up
Thanks.
there, by the way. So, I think I would look at it, especially relative to what we're talking about on this podcast, as if you think historically what it meant to be an executive leader or what the path toward executive leadership was, right? You know, that person was generally the most experienced person in their silo, right? The best accountant might become CFO. The sales leader might become the chief revenue or chief marketing officer, right? And now what that's evolved into is a shift away from just being defined by providing the right answers and outcomes, right? Based on your sort of historical knowledge, kind of working your way up and doing a thing and then being the best person at that thing. Now you have to be the best person at everything, in a sense, right? You really have to be able to keep pace with technical change. And I don't just mean CIOs, right? I mean, it's a very easy parallel or very easy analogy for a CIO, but this is true, I think, across all functional leadership, right? And, it's not your value is no longer in knowing everything. It's really in being able to learn and adapt quickly and then break down silos so that you can connect pieces and collaborate, right? So for me, right, it might mean that I'm not just the guy that keeps the network running, right? It might be more like I have to figure out how to ensure some piece of AI technology we are implementing integrates with, our financial models or practice group workflows and really become a more of a co-pilot, kind of connecting business values across our firm and ensuring that, technology strategy is business strategy, right? And so it's this evolution to connect and collaborate. And maybe I'm no longer the subject matter expert in every single thing that I'm responsible for, because it's frankly not possible, I don't think, to have a deep level of expertise in every single thing. You have to be able to kind of connect the dots and break down those silos. And that is, I think, a significant shift that we're seeing.
So I think one of the things that I've seen throughout my career in law firms is that there's a much higher expectation for the C-suite to be more strategic thinkers. I think you're
Sure.
absolutely right. We used to be expected to be subject matter expertise. And now it's not just about understanding how finance works and how money flows through the organization, but really seeing what's going on throughout the industry and throughout the ecosystem and seeing how that can potentially affect us. And that's not it's not necessarily an easy shift to make, right? Understanding how the systems work to understanding how the systems work
Sure.
in the macro sense. Um, what kind of coaching would you give sort of the next generation around how to develop those skills?
Yeah. So,
This isn't just for you. Anybody can jump
no,
in.
yeah. Listen, I'll look for some help on this one too. But I think I mean the first thing I would say is you have to build your network, right? You have to build your network, and it needs to include people who aren't responsible for the same things you are, that can educate you on their own functional areas. You have to be willing to fail and willing to ask questions and put yourself out there, right? I mean, I think those are really critical leadership development skills, even if failure seems counterintuitive, which I know is hard for some people. But um, and then the other thing is what I like to do is try and drive or foster a culture of like universal minimum standards of like technical proficiency, right? So I offer myself up to try and help other people become smarter in technology in the hope that they'll return that favor to me, right? If I, am looking at a spreadsheet full of numbers that are related to my budget. I'll call the CFO and say, hey, how can I make me smarter about this? What are the ways that I should be looking at this, right? Because you really have to understand not just, for me, again, what's happening from a technology perspective, where we're going, but also then you have to be able to relate it back to business value and business outcomes, right? And so having those relationships has, for me, been very critical in that.
I mean, that takes a certain humility too, which I don't think everyone always associates with the C-suite, right? Is the ability to
Yeah.
say, I don't understand this. Could you explain it to me?
I think that is one of the most powerful like core skills you can have as a senior leader is to be willing to understand like, listen, I'm a smart guy. I know a lot about a lot, right? And I'm comfortable in this space. And where I'm uncomfortable is here. So help me get smarter, right? I mean, I know that that's not easy for many people to kind of move beyond that ego, but I think it's been um, for me anyway a significant factor in my journey.
Yeah, I mean, there's a perception that if you act like you don't know everything, then people won't take you seriously. And that, in my experiences, that's been actually the opposite. As soon as you recognize where other people's expertise is, then
Hmm.
you all grow. Any other thoughts? Anybody want to jump in on this one?
Taking a little bit, something else Michael said spurred my memory that you really do have to speak the language of the person you're working with. If that's the managing partner, it's a different language. If it's, you're speaking to the business development chief, it's a different language. It's your two big things I think a CIO, at least from my perspective, I'm doing is solving problems and looking and supporting new opportunities. And when you're working with different people, whether you're working with a partner outside of the firm, a vendor of any sort, or you're working with internal managers, or you're working with an end user that's frustrated, everybody has a different level of communication they want, and they'll thrive the most on, with. So being able to recognize what that person needs to feed them the right information so that they can be the best they can be and leverage the most out of the technology you're giving them is a critical skill.
It's the chief question asker, right? You have to be able to put the puzzle pieces together,
Yeah.
and being able to ask questions. And again, like coming full circle, right? And sometimes when you ask a question, you inherently become vulnerable because you don't know the answer. Maybe you know the answer, and you're looking for to drive something in a particular direction. But in the times when you don't know the answer, you just have to be willing to go with it, right? And then be 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 able to adapt quickly enough to kind of tell that story and put it together for people.
So I'm going to surface a question that we got during the panel that I'm going to direct at Adam this time. So what's the difference between a CIO and a CTO, since Adam is our resident CTO?
I think that depends on who you're asking. And since you're asking me, I'll give it my best shot. um, Traditionally, it has been depends upon the market you're talking about. So in a lot of ways, information has been identified as like what makes the business run versus technology has been what makes the business, the client-facing side of things operate, right? So um, the CIO would manage the network and the servers, whereas the chief technology officer would manage things like the client-side operations. And of course, this would be dependent upon the industry. Where the reason I hold the CTO title instead of the CIO title is sort of along those lines of thinking, but there's an amalgamation happening where these roles are becoming intermixed. So as we have grown as an industry and as technology has become sort of entwined in the day-to-day of what we do, I have pushed a lot of my daily IT functions to third-party vendors, meaning I don't run a NOC, right? There's a network operations center that manages my network, and they monitor they monitor traffic. They are the IT, the core IT, right? That's not my responsibility on a daily basis. Sure, I am ultimately responsible for managing and overseeing what they do. But when it comes right down to it, I trust others to know more than I do and to keep on top of the latest trends, security needs, making sure that my network functions, my PCs stay operational, they get their updates. Things just happen in work. So the information side of the business functions. The reason I have the CTO title is because I look at how technology can make us more functional, more successful, and really re-engages the client side of the business. So from a legal perspective, right now for us, that is, what does technology do for us on a daily basis that allows us to be more successful and to grow? Specifically, where I look at that is what's client facing, specifically what do the clients engage with? And so that's how I sort of differentiate the two. But I recognize that other people on this panel probably do the same thing. They just do it for both, right? And so, but I don't do certain functions of the CIO, and there's probably certain functions of the CTO that others don't do. So technology is vast, information is vast, and so everybody has their own opinion of it. I've talked to so many people in this field and other fields, and the answers are as vast as people are. And I would love others' input on it, because what I perceive to be one thing, everybody else has a different opinion on it. It's sort of like, what's your favorite type of pizza at this point? So what used to be very core functions of technology versus information and information governance, that has sort of become pretty enmeshed in different ways.
I agree with
Well, and we're
Adam.
seeing, oh, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree with Adam. It really depends on the industry you're in, and it depends on the specific company. So I mentioned I was at 5 different law firms, 4 of which I was the department head. In the 90s, we called our department head the information systems director. Some people might call it an IT director. It was the same thing. It's the same job. At another firm, I was the CTO. It was the same job. It was the department head of the technology department, the technology function, all information systems and related services. And I've been a CIO twice, 2 different law firms, and it's the same job wherever I've gone. So it's really what the firm chose as what they wanted to call the top tier position. Some firms don't like the chief titles. They don't have very many chiefs. I think that was definitely the case up until the early 2000s, when chief titles started to permeate through the law firms. And usually it comes through the large law firms, the AmLaw 100, then the 200 and so forth. And some that felt like they were too big or too small for the big title of CIO, they chose CTO, but it was the same job. You're doing the same exact things. Some companies might write them different. And there are law firms that have a CIO and a CTO like positions. I may not call them exactly those titles. One is tactical, the CTO, and one is strategic, the CIO. So that's where I've seen the delineation, but it does seem like it's a lot of firm by firm choice about what they have.
Yeah, and actually, Skip, taking that a step further, I've seen that sort of title. So I've taking it, and what they'll do is they'll say, Well, instead of like a chief innovation officer or a chief information officer, they'll do innovation officer, right? So the technology is just every day sort of, let's be honest, right now, if you're a CIO or a CTO, if it plugs in, you're responsible for it. I mean, it's an old trope that we've all had, but the reality is that's sort of where you go to. Like this morning, I woke up to like 14 messages. This isn't working, that isn't working. And I just kept copy and pasting the same link to Amazon Web Services being down, right? So we're recording this on a day where AWS services were down, which meant that a lot of the things that we needed, specifically, unfortunately, the companies that we relied upon also relied upon AWS. And so it's like, well, you know what? There's nothing I can do about it. Well, what do? Be creative. I'm not sure, answer the phone. The reality is we are relied upon for so many different pieces of the puzzle, and there's only so much we can do. And so depending on which way you take it, innovation and technology is such a unique place, and sort of those worlds merging. And as Jim was talking about, AI and how AI is sort of taking over, and that is innovation. And so as we look at how that's going to merge and meld together, I'm sure these titles will shift again. And as we're talking about the C-suite and law firms and how that sort of evolved, I still thank suits rather for the C-suite when there was no COO, right? My role as a chief operating officer, that's a new title in the legal field. And Donna Paulson could be thanked for that. And if you talk to others, really, it's true. I think that she was one of the first to really put that out there. And then all of a sudden, law firms are like, oh, we don't have to have an intake director and an operations director, and we can actually have a chief operating officer. And so they started using the title.
They used to call them executive directors long ago.
Yeah. I think
COO
although
title
now
was fairly new.
Yeah, I think the executive director role has really gotten relegated, although this is not to say that individuals in that role are any less, but I think that has been used, at least in the Midwest where I'm at, more exclusively for nonprofit organizations. So when we look at individuals who are executive directors around here anyways, we tend to think that those individuals hold leadership roles with boards of directors for nonprofits. That's really what you see in this area. So I think it's also regional, because I know we're represented, at least on this panel, East Coast, Midwest, and West Coast. And so I think you definitely see things geographically.
And we've got new C-suite titles being introduced every day, right? So there's the Chief AI Officer coming through now. What used to be the Chief Innovation Officer, sometimes.
And I just saw the other day, there's somebody who now holds the title of Chief Information Technology Officer. So there you go, right? You're trying to figure out what it is, just give them all of them. And then you don't have to try to figure it out. Yeah.
I honestly think my title should be FIO, for figure it out.
There
on
you
a
go.
daily basis. Figure it out.
Okay, one last question for Adam. Your experience is a bit different, and you get a powerful perspective because of that. What does leading without losing your mind look like for you?
It's perspective. Like I said, it's all perspective. And it's so timely that you're asking these questions. The past 2 weeks have been an incredible personal and professional challenge for me. And every time, in a leadership role, you are looked upon as the individual who is expected to be the one to make the decisions. You are the one who is looked upon for the answers. We took these roles knowing that we would be in those positions where people would come to us with everything, even things that didn't make sense, even things that were outside of our wheelhouse. And we did it because that's what we wanted. I think at this point, if we're at this place in our career, we knew that. And so when individuals do come to us with those questions and they keep peppering us with these requests that seem out of pocket and just left field, we have to really maintain perspective that not a big deal, right? I mean, when I get frustrated, it's because at my level, at our level, individuals who make it to the C-suite, there is a difference. Now, as a chief operating officer, my level is probably engaging with clients where I'm assuming now, Cecy, you obviously engage with clients because you are in a role where your business works directly with clients, but your clients are law firms. I would imagine anybody else in this panel, unless there's a security related incident, you're probably not engaging with any of the law firm clients. In my role, I should never be engaging with clients at the law firm unless there's a client services related issue. And the last couple of weeks, I've been engaging with clients at the law firm. So it's really been testing my patience. But once again, I keep things into perspective. We're all human. And so when we look at the bigger picture, it's really our responsibility to make sure that we are showing sort of that compassionate servant leadership. If somebody's asking a question, we just say, look, I know this is important to you. In the grand scheme of things, it may be a significant issue, but getting excited about it, getting upset about it, getting frustrated, it's not going to help us solve the problem. Let's get through it today. We can look at it tomorrow. We actually are coming on the other side of a pretty big incident, client services related, going back to what I was previously saying. It's not a huge issue, but it is big enough that once we get through it and we've solved the problems, we're going to come back together as a team and we're going to hash it out. And at that point, we can have a little bit of a lively discussion. But in the moment, we just have to remember, look, what's the most important thing? And in this case, it's putting the client first. And if you're in the C-suite, your client is the employees of the firm. If you're in a CIO role, it's the employees directly under you, it's the attorneys, it's the billable staff, the non-billable staff, whoever you're serving at the firm. Once you get through whatever the situation is, then you can go back and then you can sort of decompress and then you can sort of let it all out, go home, right? Just make sure that whatever you're doing, you're keeping perspective. It's not life or death. Nothing we're doing in this role is life or death. I've seen life or death. This is not it. And so if you can just remember, it's going to be fine. You know, there's always tomorrow. There's always going to be tomorrow. I remember, you know, how many times I would take work home with me. And I have had to really make an effort to just step back and say, this will be here tomorrow. It's fine. Even if I were to take it home with me tonight, I'm still going to be dealing with it tomorrow. So why don't I just deal with it tomorrow and enjoy this evening, right? I think that's the key. Losing your mind, what's the point? You know, if there are moments that stress you out consistently, then take a look at those moments and try to figure out what is consistent about those moments. Maybe it's something you can mitigate. Maybe it's something you can work around through. If there are people, yeah, you know, there are obviously solutions to those problems as well, but there are always answers, and nothing is that critical. So.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Gentlemen, any other final words before we wrap this up?
I've got one. It's just a quick little sentiment. This is something that I wish I would have known 30 years ago. When I'm presented with something that is either confusing or counter to what I think would make sense, it's really easy for me to have the perspective that I'm right and they're wrong. And it's really powerful to learn how it makes sense from the other person's perspective. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. Doesn't mean that there can't be a compromise or that it can't be improved. But when you're interacting with somebody and you're finding it challenging, they feel they're right. If you can understand why they feel that they're right, you can find a way to agree to what is right between the two of you and move forward.
That's good advice. I don't always do that as well as I should.
Yeah, and if I can just tack onto that, Jim, I think one of the important things to keep in mind is being accountable to yourself and recognizing that if you are able to see their perspective and you have one of those moments, radical accountability and just saying, shit, they're right. That's fine. You know what? It's okay to be wrong. And to say, you know what? I loved your perspective on this and it's allowed me to see it from a different perspective. It's okay to be that person sometimes. It's okay to be able to see it through a different perspective and to change your opinion and to change your mind on something. And that's where real growth happens. Not to keep that from somebody when they've actually had the ability to persuade you.
That's the perfect way to end this episode. Thank you for joining us for So You Want to Join the C-Suite, where we go behind the title and inside the realities of law firm leadership. We'll be back next month for Chaos Theory, when leadership doesn't match the brochure, the disconnect between expectations and reality, and how to navigate it.